When we think of the Second World War, certain aircraft immediately come to mind. The elegant Spitfire, dancing through the skies over Kent during the Battle of Britain. The mighty Lancaster bomber, a symbol of Bomber Command's relentless campaign over Germany. These planes are legends, and rightly so, but history is more than just the headline acts. The war in the air was fought by thousands of aircraft, and many of them have been overshadowed by their more famous counterparts. These were the workhorses, the specialists, the aircraft that filled the gaps and performed the thankless tasks. They were bombers, night fighters, tank busters, torpedo planes. This is a tribute to those forgotten heroes. We will explore 10 British warplanes that, for one reason or another, have faded from the spotlight. These are aircraft that pushed the boundaries of technology, that adapted to new and terrifying threats, and that made a significant difference on the battlefield. Each one has a unique story to tell, a tale of innovation, bravery, and sacrifice. They might not be as famous as the Spitfire or the Lancaster, but they are just as much a part of the story of Britain's struggle for survival and ultimate victory in the Second World War. So, let us journey back in time, to the airfields and factories of wartime Britain. We will dust off the old blueprints and rediscover these magnificent machines. From the powerful Typhoon to the strange-looking Defiant, we will shine a light on the unsung heroes of the sky. It is time to give these forgotten warplanes the recognition they have long deserved. The Hawker Typhoon was a big, powerful, and fearsome-looking aircraft. It was designed to be a high-altitude interceptor, a replacement for the Hawker Hurricane. However, it initially had a lot of problems. Its massive Napier Sabre engine was unreliable and the pilot's view was not great, but the Typhoon found its true calling at low altitude. Instead of chasing high-flying German bombers, it became one of the most effective ground attack aircraft of the war. It was a rugged and stable platform, capable of carrying a heavy load of bombs and rockets. The Typhoon's finest hour came during the Battle of Normandy in 1944. Armed with powerful rockets, they could destroy a German Panther tank or Tiger tank with a single, well-aimed salvo. German soldiers called them Jabos, short for Jagdbomber, and the sound of a Typhoon's engine struck fear into their hearts. So why is the Typhoon often forgotten? It lived in the shadow of the Spitfire. The Typhoon's job was less glamorous. It was dirty, dangerous work, flying low and fast through a hail of enemy fire, but its contribution was immense. By crippling the German army's ability to move and resupply its forces in France, the Typhoon helped pave the way for the Allied victory in Europe. It was a true warrior of the front lines. The Bristol Beaufighter was a formidable and versatile aircraft. It was a large, twin-engined heavy fighter, developed quickly at the start of the war using parts from the Bristol Beaufort torpedo bomber. It was heavily armed, 420mm cannons in the nose, 6 machine guns in the wings. That level of firepower was devastating. It could tear enemy aircraft apart. It earned the chilling nickname the Whispering Death from the Japanese. Its Bristol Hercules sleeve valve engines were relatively quiet. Often the first sign was the sudden roar of its cannons. By then, it was too late. Over Britain at night it became the premier night fighter, equipped with early airborne radar. Crews made up of a pilot and a radar operator. They hunted German bombers in darkness, but it didn't only defend Britain, it served in every theater of the war, from the cold waters of the North Sea to the humid jungles of Burma. In the Mediterranean it acted as a long-range strike fighter, attacking shipping with torpedoes and rockets. In the Far East it proved rugged and reliable as a ground attack plane, often overlooked because it was a specialist, not the nimble dogfighter of a Spitfire, a jack of all trades, the heavy hitter that did the dirty work. Night fighter, strike aircraft, torpedo bomber, ground attack plane. Its versatility was its greatest strength, a war winner that adapted and excelled in multiple roles. The de Havilland Mosquito was a revolutionary aircraft, one of the most remarkable designs of the entire war. Known as the Wooden Wonder, it was built almost entirely out of wood. At a time when metal was in short supply, this was a brilliant idea. The airframe was a composite of plywood, spruce, balsa, glued and screwed together. The Mosquito was designed from the outset with one key advantage in mind: speed. Designers believed a bomber fast enough to outrun fighters wouldn't need defensive guns. That philosophy proved spectacularly successful. The Mosquito was one of the fastest aircraft in the world when it entered service. For a long time the Luftwaffe's standard fighters simply couldn't catch it. One famous mission, the raid on the Gestapo headquarters in Copenhagen. Mosquitoes flew at rooftop height to bomb the building and destroy records. That action allowed many Danish resistance fighters to escape capture. The Mosquito's versatility was legendary. Fighter-bomber versions, armed with cannons and rockets for ground attack. Night fighter versions, used speed to hunt German bombers and V-1 flying bombs. High-altitude photo reconnaissance versions, flew deep into Germany to gather intelligence. No other WWII aircraft was adapted so successfully for so many tasks. It excelled in every role, a testament to brilliant design. While well known to enthusiasts, it's less famous than the Spitfire or Lancaster. Beautiful, elegant, deadly, one of Britain's greatest technological achievements. The Fairey Swordfish was an aircraft that looked like it belonged in a different era. A biplane with a fabric-covered frame, an open cockpit, it seemed hopelessly outdated by 1939. Its crews affectionately nicknamed it the string bag, because, like a string shopping bag, it could carry an astonishing variety of weapons and equipment. It was slow, with a top speed of only about 140 miles per hour, making it vulnerable to enemy fighters and anti-aircraft fire. On paper, it should have been a complete failure in a war dominated by fast, modern monoplanes. Yet it became one of the most important naval aircraft of the war. The Swordfish's greatest moment came in November 1940, during the attack on the Italian fleet at Taranto. A small force of just 21 Swordfish, launched from the aircraft carrier HMS Illustrious, flew a daring nighttime raid. Flying low and slow, they dropped their torpedoes with incredible precision, sinking or crippling 3 Italian battleships. This single attack changed the balance of naval power in the Mediterranean overnight. The Japanese Navy studied the Taranto raid carefully before planning their own similar attack on Pearl Harbor a year later. The Swordfish's success was due to its incredible agility and the skill of its crews. Its low speed was actually an advantage during torpedo attacks. It could take off from and land on the tiny decks of escort carriers in rough seas, something that faster and heavier aircraft struggled to do. Throughout the Battle of the Atlantic, Swordfish flying from these small carriers played a vital role in protecting Allied convoys from German U-boats. They would patrol the cold, gray waters of the Atlantic, hunting for submarines with depth charges and rockets. The Swordfish is a forgotten hero because it was so unassuming. For its role in crippling the Italian Navy and winning the Battle of the Atlantic, the humble string bag deserves a special place in history. The Westland Whirlwind was an aircraft that was truly ahead of its time. When it first flew in 1938, it was a revelation. It was the RAF's first twin-engined, single-seat fighter, and it was powerfully armed with 4 20mm cannons clustered in the nose. This gave it a concentration of firepower that no other fighter in the world could match. It was also incredibly fast and handled beautifully, with pilots praising its excellent visibility and responsive controls. However, the Whirlwind story is one of great potential that was ultimately unfulfilled. Its biggest problem was its engines. It was powered by 2 Rolls-Royce Peregrine engines, which were a new and complex design. Unfortunately, these engines proved to be unreliable and difficult to maintain. Rolls-Royce decided to focus all its efforts on developing the more famous Merlin engine, which powered the Spitfire, Hurricane, and Lancaster. This meant that the Peregrine engine was never fully developed, and production was stopped. Without a reliable engine, the Whirlwind's future was doomed. Only 2 squadrons were ever equipped with the aircraft. Despite its short service life and small numbers, the Whirlwind proved to be a very effective aircraft when it worked. Flying fast and low, they would strike German airfields, railway lines, and shipping. These missions were known as rhubarbs, and the Whirlwind, with its powerful cannons, excelled at them. The Whirlwind is a forgotten classic because so few were ever built. It represents a fascinating what-if of aviation history. As it is, it remains a footnote, a beautiful and powerful aircraft that never got the chance to show its full potential. The Armstrong Whitworth Whitley was one of the 3 British heavy bombers in service with the RAF at the outbreak of war in 1939, alongside the Wellington and the Hampton. It was a large, angular, and somewhat ungainly-looking aircraft, with a distinctive nose-down flying attitude that made it look like it was constantly sniffing the ground. The Whitley was designed in the mid-1930s and was quite advanced for its time, featuring a metal monocoque fuselage and retractable landing gear. The Whitley's early missions were not bombing raids. In the first months of the war, the British government was reluctant to bomb German cities. Instead, Whitley crews were sent on long, dangerous flights over Germany to drop leaflets. These propaganda missions were known as nickel raids, and while they had little effect on German morale, they provided invaluable experience for the crews in long-distance night navigation. When the bombing campaign began in earnest in 1940, the Whitley was at the forefront. Its crews flew deep into Germany, attacking industrial targets and transport hubs. These were perilous missions. The aircraft was slow and poorly defended, making it vulnerable to night fighters and anti-aircraft fire. The Whitley was also the aircraft used for the first British paratrooper raid of the war, and was used extensively by Coastal Command for long-range maritime patrols, hunting for U-boats in the Bay of Biscay and the Atlantic. It was a versatile if vulnerable workhorse of the early war years. The Whitley was quickly replaced in the frontline bomber role by newer, more capable four-engine bombers like the Halifax and Lancaster from 1942 onwards. But the Whitley and its crews were pioneers. They were the trailblazers who flew into the dark, unknown skies of the Third Reich when Britain stood alone. For that, they deserve our respect and remembrance. The short Stirling holds a special place in history as the Royal Air Force's first-ever four-engined heavy bomber. When it entered service in 1941, it was a truly massive and imposing aircraft. It had a huge fuselage, a vast wingspan, and a towering undercarriage that made it look like a giant on the airfield. The Stirling was designed to carry a very heavy bomb load over long distances. However, the Stirling's design was hampered by a strange requirement from the Air Ministry. The wingspan had to be less than 100 feet so that the aircraft would fit into existing hangars. This meant the wings were relatively short and thick for such a heavy aircraft. This design compromise had a significant impact on its performance. It limited the Stirling's operational ceiling, meaning it could not fly as high as the later Lancaster or Halifax bombers. This made it more vulnerable to anti-aircraft fire and forced it to fly through the most heavily defended altitudes over Germany. Despite its limitations, the Stirling was a key part of Bomber Command's offensive in the middle years of the war. It took part in the first 1,000 bomber raid on Cologne in 1942. It was a tough and resilient aircraft that could absorb a great deal of damage and still bring its crew home. The crews themselves were incredibly brave. The Stirling was also used extensively for other roles, such as mine-laying in enemy waters, and later in the war, for towing gliders and dropping paratroopers during the D-Day landings. The Stirling is often forgotten, because it was so quickly overshadowed by the superior Avro Lancaster. But we should not forget its vital contribution. It was a flawed giant, but a brave and important one nonetheless. The Handley Page Hampton was another of the Royal Air Force's twin-engine medium bombers at the start of the war. It had a very unusual and distinctive design. The fuselage was very deep and narrow. Crews called it the flying suitcase or the flying tadpole. This cramped design made it very uncomfortable for its four-man crew on long missions. The navigator had to lie prone in the nose. The gunners were stuck in tight, exposed positions. Despite that, the Hampton was fast and maneuverable with good handling for its day. It went into action at the start of the war, initially on daylight raids against German naval targets. Those missions were disastrous. Flying in daylight without fighter escort, the slow, lightly armed bombers were easy prey for the Luftwaffe's fast, heavily armed Messerschmitt Bf-109. Losses were horrific. Unescorted daylight bombing proved suicidal. The RAF learned the lesson and switched Hamptons to night operations. That shift came because of heavy sacrifices by early Hampton crews. At night, the Hampton found new life. It joined the early night bombing campaign and excelled at mine-laying. Flying low over the sea at night, crews dropped gardening mines in shipping lanes, harbors, and canals. This was dangerous work, requiring precise low-altitude navigation, often in terrible weather and sometimes under enemy fire. Gardening caused major disruption to German naval traffic and to coastal supply routes. By 1942, it was largely replaced by four-engined heavy bombers, but the Hampton was crucial in the first 3 years of the war. The crews who flew the flying suitcase showed incredible bravery. Their contribution should not be forgotten. The Bolton-Paul Defiant was an aircraft built around a fascinating but ultimately flawed idea. It was a two-seat fighter, but with a unique twist. It had no forward-firing guns at all. All of its armament, 4.303 machine guns, was concentrated in a hydraulically operated dorsal turret behind the pilot. The theory: fly alongside enemy bomber formations so the gunner had a clear field of fire, or fly below bomber formations so the gunner could sweep upward. At first, it worked surprisingly well. In May 1940, during the Dunkirk evacuation, the Defiant entered combat and scored notable successes. German fighters, thinking it a Hurricane, attacked from the rear. Their mistake. But the Luftwaffe adapted and changed tactics. They exploited the Defiant's fatal flaw. no forward guns and vulnerability to head-on and below attacks. In the Battle of Britain it suffered heavy losses. Too heavy and slow to fight Bf-109s. Crews stood little chance. It was withdrawn from daylight operations. Yet the Defiant found new life as a night fighter. At night its lack of forward guns mattered less. Its turret was perfect for attacking bombers from below. With early airborne radar it became a successful RAF night fighter in 1941. It helped defend British cities during the Blitz. Its daytime failure was costly, but its night service makes it a forgotten wartime hero. The Ferry Battle was a single-engine light bomber that, on paper, seemed quite advanced when it was designed in the mid-1930s. It was a sleek, all-metal monoplane powered by the same Rolls-Royce Merlin engine that would later make the Spitfire famous. It was intended to be a fast, modern replacement for the old biplane bombers of the day. The Royal Air Force had high hopes for the battle and ordered it in large numbers. By the time the war broke out, 10 squadrons were equipped with the aircraft and were sent to France as part of the Advanced Air Striking Force. They were expected to be able to carry out precise, tactical bombing raids against an advancing enemy. Unfortunately, the reality of modern warfare proved the Ferry Battle to be tragically obsolete. While it was fast compared to the biplanes it replaced, it was painfully slow compared to the frontline German fighters. It was also very lightly armed for self-defense, with just one forward-firing machine gun and one rear-facing gun. When Germany invaded France and the Low Countries in May 1940, the battle squadrons were sent on desperate, low-level missions to try and halt the German advance by bombing bridges and troop columns. These were essentially suicide missions. The crews of the ferry battles flew with incredible courage, facing a curtain of anti-aircraft fire and swarms of enemy fighters. The losses were astronomical. In one famous attack on the Maastricht bridges, all 5 aircraft sent on the mission were shot down. 2 Victoria Crosses, Britain's highest award for gallantry, were awarded posthumously to the crews of these aircraft. In just 1 week of fighting, the Royal Air Force lost nearly 100 ferry battles. It was a brutal lesson in the vulnerability of slow, unescorted bombers in daylight. The aircraft was quickly and quietly withdrawn from frontline combat. However, it is important to remember not the flaws of the machine, but the immense bravery of the men who flew it. The ferry battle may have been a flawed warrior, but its crews were true heroes who deserved to be honored. The skies of the Second World War were a vast and complex battlefield, filled with a greater variety of aircraft than at any other time in history. While the legends like the Spitfire, Hurricane, and Lancaster rightly dominate our memory of that conflict, they were only part of a much larger story. As we have seen, the Allied air effort was supported by a huge fleet of other aircraft, each designed for a specific and vital purpose. From the tank-busting Typhoon to the obsolete but heroic Swordfish, these forgotten warplanes made contributions that were absolutely essential to the final victory. They were the unsung heroes, the workhorses, the specialists of the air war. These aircraft tell a story of incredible innovation and adaptation. The Mosquito, built of wood, showed that radical ideas could yield spectacular results. The Beaufighter demonstrated how a good design could be adapted for a multitude of roles: night fighting, attacking ships. The stories of the Defiant and the Ferry Battle also teach us important lessons about the brutal realities of war, where promising theories could be proven tragically wrong in the heat of combat. Yet even these failures often found a new purpose, a new way to contribute, thanks to the ingenuity of their designers and the tenacity of their crews. Most importantly, remembering these aircraft means remembering the thousands of brave airmen who flew them. These were the men who flew the slow Hamptons on long night missions, who hunted U-boats in lumbering Whitleys. Their jobs were often less glamorous than that of a Spitfire pilot, but they were no less dangerous. They flew into the dark, over cold seas, and low against the ground, facing intense fire and uncertain odds. So, the next time we picture the air war, let's expand our view. Let's look beyond the famous few and remember the forgotten fleet. By remembering these machines, we gain a fuller, richer understanding of the Second World War. We honor the legacy of the designers who built them and, above all, the memory of the crews who flew them. They may be the forgotten heroes of the sky, but their contribution to securing freedom will never be erased.